Tonight, I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin with the surprising resignation of U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. What's behind her decision and who might replace her? Here's Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry with what he knows. Good evening, Ed.
Good to see you, Shannon. When you think about all the leaks that have frustrated President Trump, pretty remarkable this one did not get out until the last minute. Perhaps that was because it was only the president and Ambassador Haley who knew about it and kept it to themselves. So there's still a bit of a mystery about why now. As Haley put it, she's been going into the UN with body armor every day, calling out Russia, Syria, Iran, while also helping to craft the tough talk mixed with diplomacy that has brought some progress with North Korea. And given her role handling these hotspots, the exit surprised many. Usually big personnel announcements like this are held until after the midterms. It allows the opposition party to try and politicize it, which is exactly what Senator Bob Menendez, a top Democrat on foreign relations, did by saying this is more chaos. He said, "I am deeply concerned about the leadership vacuum she leaves and the national security impact of her departure at this time of continued disarray for this administration." The president countered that Haley had told him months ago she wanted a breather after a long tenure as governor of South Carolina before jumping right into this post as he touted an interesting possible replacement.
Now the United States is respected. Countries may not like what we do, but they respect what we do.
I think Ivanka would be incredible. That doesn't mean I'd pick her because you'd be accused of nepotism. Even though I'm not sure there's anybody more competent in the world, but that's okay.
Well, that sounded like a trial balloon for his daughter, but she tweeted quickly that she has no interest, and the president told reporters he has 5 other candidates he's looking at. The 2 he named so far as possibilities, former Deputy National Security Advisor Dina Powell and Rick Grenell, who has won praise as ambassador to Germany for getting tough on Iran. As for what's next for Haley, well, she said she's not going to run for any office in 2020, either president or Senate. And Lindsey Graham said he has no interest in the Trump cabinet. One of Haley's former advisors told us tonight there's one scenario floating around where if Graham becomes attorney general, that seat is open again for a 6-year term in 2020. Yes, in Haley's home state. Watch.
She has, of course, come out telling the president and telling the public that she has no intention of running in 2020. But let's be honest with ourselves. Situations can change. People can be called upon to step up.
Now, Haley, who was a critic of candidate Trump in 2016, was firm about saying there will be no 2020 primary challenge to the president, but 2024, hey, the door's open, maybe for her, maybe for all kinds of people. Never too early, Shannon, for us to start.
Apparently not. I mean, you could be running in for president. I could be, who knows?
Probably not.
All right, Ed, thanks.
Good to see you.
All right, the newest Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, diving straight into the caseload today, looking very at ease, asking several questions during his first round of oral arguments. Correspondent Kristen Fisher has details for us tonight. Hi, Kristen.
Shannon, hard to believe that just 4 days ago, Judge Kavanaugh's fate was still very much in question. Today, he took his seat on the Supreme Court, and for the first time, you could actually see 5 solidly conservative justices on the high court. It is a moment that Democrats have dreaded and Republicans have dreamed of for decades.
We do not consent. We will not forget.
Just a sprinkling of protesters outside the Supreme Court, while inside, Chief Justice John Roberts was wishing the new justice a long and happy career in our common calling. But then it was all business, and Justice Kavanaugh dived into his new job by asking about a dozen questions of both sides in arguments over increased prison sentences for repeat offenders. Just hours earlier, he promised to put the bitterness of his confirmation battle behind him.
Every American can be assured that I will be an independent and impartial justice, devoted to equal justice under law. Although the Senate confirmation process tested me, as it has tested others, it did not change me.
But the battle rages on Capitol Hill. Today, Republican Senator Tom Cotton said he strongly suspects that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was behind the leak of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's explosive letter.
I believe the Schumer political operation was behind this from the very beginning.
Senator Schumer's staff calls the accusations a fairy tale, but Senators Cotton and Ted Cruz are continuing to call for an investigation into how that letter got out. In the meantime, Justice Kavanaugh will be back in the courtroom tomorrow to hear 2 other cases, one involving the detention of illegal immigrants, specifically which undocumented immigrants can be detained during deportation proceedings. The second case deals with Navy sailors who hope to recover damages for being exposed to asbestos.
And with all of these cases, he'll be assisted by his 4 law clerks. They're all women. It's the first time that's ever happened. It's also the first time that more than half of all the Supreme Court's law clerks are women. An interesting side note, given the climate in which Kavanaugh was confirmed, Shannon.
Absolutely. Kristen Fisher, thank you very much. All right, changing the Democrats' tune from when they go low, we go high. Hillary Clinton's now rejecting calls for a return to civility in American politics. Correspondent Trace Gallagher has that story from our West Coast bureau. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. During the interview with CNN, Hillary Clinton rewound the clock 25 years, saying that's how long Republicans have been lying about her. She then highlighted her examples of GOP incivility, like the disputed 2000 election, the Swift boat attacks against John Kerry, even the swearing-in ceremony for Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Watch.
What was done last night in the White House was a political rally. It further undermined the image and integrity of the court. And that troubles me greatly. It saddens me.
She went on to accuse Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and President Trump of demeaning the confirmation process and attacked Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and all women who were speaking out. Then she went after the Republican Party as a whole. Here's again.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again.
Her civility comments clearly struck a chord with lawmakers like Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, who tweeted, quote, "At a time when Republicans are being shot, stabbed, doxxed, beaten, mailed powder, run out of restaurants, and sent death threats, Hillary Clinton urges Democrats to be even more uncivil. What an irresponsible statement every Democrat should denounce." And Congressman Steve Scalise, who nearly died after being shot by a registered Democrat, responded by simply writing, quote, "Seriously, Hillary?" But Clinton doubled down, saying her husband, former President Bill Clinton, thinks Democrats have to be tougher and stand up to the bullying and intimidation of Republicans. Today, the president was asked about the Clinton interview.
I guess that's why she lost. She doesn't get it. She never did. I knew that a long time ago. Hillary never got it. That's why she lost.
Hillary Clinton was also asked about impeaching the president. She said that will be left for others to decide. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. Okay, so incivility reaching a fever pitch in some places across the nation. Republican Senator Rand Paul worries the heated political rhetoric could turn deadly. Remember, he was attacked last year, and his wife told us right here on the show last week she now sleeps with a loaded gun by her bed, fearing more attacks on their family. All right, let's bring in tonight's power panel. Former senior advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Philippe Reines, host of The Next Revolution right here on Fox News, Steve Hilton, and syndicated radio talk show host Chris Plant. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, so you heard a little bit of what the former secretary had to say there. I want to play another little bit of how she was reacting to the Kavanaugh swearing-in ceremony at the White House.
What was done last night in the White House was a political rally. It further undermined the image and integrity of the court. And that troubles me greatly. It saddens me because our judicial system has been viewed as one of the main pillars of our Constitution.
And the battle over it has done to the way people view the court now.
Can I just start by saying that watching the interview reminded me of how happy I am that Hillary Clinton didn't become president of the United States. She's still out there dividing the country, being divisive. She's trying to undermine this administration and the government and the Supreme Court and the Senate. Other than that, I think she's doing great work for the country. The process was obviously very divisive because the Democrats decided they were going to pull out all the stops and try to destroy Brett Kavanaugh and his career and his life and make sure that he didn't get on the court. And with the tactics that they used and the methods that they used, I think they've damaged the Supreme Court. I think they've damaged the Senate, the process, our government, this city, the country. I think they've done a lot of damage.
Philippe, I know you want to take a swing at that, but
Literally.
what do you mean? Please let's not get to fisticuffs.
That's why Steve's in between us.
We're not getting.
There's a door over there.
We're not getting to fisticuffs here on the Court. But, I mean, she did talk about the fact that no more civility until Democrats take back the House or Senate, because she says the only thing that Republicans understand at this point is power. So what do you make of that?
Well, I would say two things. First, to Chris's point, I don't think that Donald Trump needs any help undermining or dividing the country. I don't think a 10-minute interview from overseas is really the reason that we're, at a fever pitch and people are apoplectic about what's going on. I think she's making a valid point. This isn't her first rodeo, and she knows that it's naive to unilaterally disarm or unilaterally be civil. It's what the Republican Party, or really the party in power, always wants you to do. They want you to feel like everything you're doing is wrong. Just sit there so we can continue being the majority. Not exactly sure what anyone's pointing to that's a problem.
Well, Steve?
I think that far from making a good point, she's actually making a really pretty pathetic spectacle of herself, because what she's doing there is pandering to the angry mob, the extremists in her party. Strong leaders stand up to the extremes in their party. They challenge them and they move the party towards the mainstream. That's actually what her husband did, to his credit, and that's why he was successful. And the fact that she can't do that, and she's pandering to these activists who are filled with rage and hate. And it's not just people on the fringe. This is Democratic senators and members of Congress going out there and inciting people to harass others physically.
Inciting what? Taking away cheese plates in restaurants?
Inciting harassment.
We're getting into people's faces, and we saw the tweet.
Shooting members of Congress
well,
on a baseball
no one is
field
asking for shooting. No one's asking for shooting.
Running people over in Portland yesterday.
That wasn't members of Congress doing that or inciting that. That was nothing to do with the actual Republican Party. This is the Democratic establishment, people in Congress going out doing this, and she's supporting it when she should be challenging it if she was a proper leader. But she's not. She's a panderer. She's weak, and she won't do anything about it because she goes along with it.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, there's plenty of leadership in the Democrat Party that has been encouraging all kinds of miscreant behavior, and we've been getting that miscreant behavior. And look, you said
the country does not like the job that
I know
Donald
you're
Trump
half
is doing,
joking,
right?
but you started out by saying you take a swing at me.
You make it sound like there's 2%.
Yeah, but then you can go and vote and have a civilized discussion. She's saying no.
You can't voting if I were you guys.
You can't have a civilized discussion.
1 month from now.
That's what you said before Trump was elected.
Chris will be a little less happy than he is right now.
Let's have another topic.
Okay.
Because we've got no time left. But I want to make sure that you all weigh in on this. Ambassador Haley stepping down, going to resign, says it has been long in the works. She and the president have talked about it for months. Not everyone is buying that, and some of them are a little bit skeptical. Senator Menendez, a Democrat, said today the announcement that she's resigning is yet another sign of the Trump administration's chaotic foreign policy. I'm deeply concerned about the leadership vacuum she leaves and the national security impact of her departure at this time of continued disarray for this administration. Steve.
What a pompous fool he is. I can't take anything he says seriously, because he's basically a totally corrupt member of Congress. His trial is a hung jury, and I think there's a lot more to come out on him. So for him to pontificate on anything is not valid. On the specific point of foreign policy, the truth is there's a vacuum. The president is exerting real leadership by shifting away from the failed policies of both Democrat and Republican administrations for years on trade, on the Middle East, on North Korea. He's really running foreign policy, and these people work for him.
Philippe and Chris, quickly, Philippe.
Well, chaos comes from the head, so it doesn't make a difference if Nikki Haley is there, or Dina Powell, or Ivanka Trump. Personally, I think there's got to be a backstory here, just the way this unfolded. She was one of my top 3 suspects as being the anonymous author.
She came out and said it definitely wasn't her, Chris.
That's what
listen, we know now that they were already talking to Dina Powell about replacing her, that this has been an orderly process. It was done in a thoughtful and intelligent way. The president had already had conversations with others about taking her place. She was brought to the White House for a nice event today, and to call it chaos is just more fake news.
Okay, these 3 we're going to have in pay-per-view, and that's going to cost you extra. We'll work that out.
Someone's got to walk me out of here.
Gentlemen, we'll get security for you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
Hurricane Michael's been upgraded to a powerful Category 3 storm, expected to strengthen even more on landfall at the Florida Panhandle. Let's go to the Fox News Extreme Weather Center meteorologist Adam Klotz for the latest. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Shannon. This is looking more and more like a real monster storm, continuing to get closer to the Gulf Coast. Currently, you're looking at winds at 125 miles an hour. That's a Category.
Someone's got to walk me out of here.
Gentlemen, we'll get security for you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
Hurricane Michael's been upgraded to a powerful Category 3 storm, expected to strengthen even more on landfall at the Florida Panhandle. Let's go to the Fox News Extreme Weather Center meteorologist Adam Klotz for the latest. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Shannon. This is looking more and more like a real monster storm, continuing to get closer to the Gulf Coast. Currently, you're looking at winds at 125 miles an hour. That's a Category 3. It becomes a Category 4 at 131 miles an hour. We are going to be very close to that by the time we make landfall. Maybe a strong Cat 3, maybe a Cat 4, but either way, it is going to pack a big punch. Everything you're looking at here highlighted in the red, that is a hurricane watch. It includes places from Pensacola stretching through Panama City, through Apalachicola, and portions of the Big Bend there in Florida. Other areas outside of that are going to see at least some impact from that, but that's where the strongest winds are going to hit. That's where the storm surge is going to be the worst. Here we are putting this into motion, and you do see currently our most recent track does jump this up right there near a Category 4, actually to a Category 4. Will it get there? We're going to be right on that borderline, but it is going to be a powerful storm either way, likely making landfall. We're looking at a maybe noon to 1 o'clock time frame. Still a little bit of time for this to move a little bit, but think lunchtime, early afternoon tomorrow is when landfall will begin to really become a reality. Here's the motion of this, and there is your very tight circle. That's when the winds are its absolute strongest, and currently this model is still suggesting 1 o'clock tomorrow around that time frame when you see landfall. Otherwise, it's not just about where this makes landfall. It's about the wind field that's going to stretch from Tallahassee over into portions of Alabama. You're getting that big. Really the most extreme winds are going to be there right at the heart of this, right around lunchtime. And then the other story with this one's going to be, it's going to be that initial wind, and it's also going to be the storm surge, especially there along the Big Bend, Shannon. Spots getting up to 8 to 12 feet of storm surge. That's going to be enough to put buildings underwater. I think this is going to be a big storm and a big story tomorrow.
Well, that's where most of my family lives, so we will be watching your reports very carefully around the clock. Adam, thank you.
Yep.
All right, the latest stop for President Trump, Iowa, as he rallies support for GOP candidates. One midterm motivator, the newest Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh.
I want to thank our incredible Republican senators for refusing to back down in the face of the Democrats' shameful campaign.
So whose base is more fired up, Republicans or Democrats? Less than a month to go until voters head to the polls. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel joins us live next.
Even more drastic steps may be necessary now that Justice Kavanaugh is on the court.
The bitter confirmation battle may be over, but Democrats are not yet ready to let go of it. So which base will be more motivated to turn out and vote next month? Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is here to weigh in. Ronna, good to have you with us
Always
tonight.
good to be here.
Okay, so both sides think it's going to be them. I mean, they're going to be the ones who they're either super angry that the Senate got this guy onto the bench, or they're super angry about the way he was treated on the way to the bench. So what do you think?
Well, the Democrats have had a lot of energy since the election because they want the power back, and opposition is wholly uniting. And we've seen in midterms of the first term of a sitting president that the party in power often loses seats. And so we have seen that. Our voters haven't been paying as much attention. They're feeling good. The economy is doing well. They don't feel that urgency. This Kavanaugh battle has brought home to them what's at stake because they have seen the chaos, the disruption, the resist, the obstruct, the dangerous path that the Democrats are taking for our country. And now they're recognizing the results that have come out of the Republican leadership. And they're saying, you know what? We have got to get out there and vote because we want this comeback to continue, and we don't want to go where the Democrats are taking us.
Well, let me ask you about this. I want to give you a chance to respond to some of your critics. American Bridge 21st Century, this is a progressive group, but one of the fundraising emails they sent out said this: Trump and the GOP's message is clear. They don't care about sexual assault against women. They don't believe women. A day of reckoning is coming for Republicans on November 6th. We all know that women are key voters, especially in suburban women in these House races are going to be very important. How do you respond to that claim?
Well, this is what Democrats do. They try and divide our country. They try and incite anger. That is just shameful to say that Republicans do not care about women. I am a woman. I'm a mother of a 15-year-old daughter. Please don't go there. But that's where they're going because it's destroy, it's destruct, it's divide our nation. Let's make women so angry. Women are smarter than that. We're delivering results right now at the Republican Party from our president. 3.7% unemployment, the lowest in history for African American, Hispanic, a 65-year low for women. We are a party that is making lives better for families across this country. So Democrats will continue the politics of destruction, and we are going to continue the politics of results.
Well, and to that point, the Washington Post talks about the fact that there's a lot of talk about by Republicans that the Democrats are obstructionists, that they have this mob mentality. The Washington Post saying this, their headline is "An Angry Mob. Republicans work to recast Democratic protests as out of control anarchy." They say the turn toward a culture war is also a tacit admission that many of the issues that Republicans had sought to run on, from tax cuts to the upbeat state of the economy, which you mentioned, have not been enough to fan GOP voters' enthusiasm and counter an electrified Democratic electorate. And we've talked about the enthusiasm gap.
Yeah, our enthusiasm's there, and I'm seeing it. We're in all these battleground congressional districts, and it's certainly lifted our candidates, and our job at the RNC is to sustain it. But it's a really clear choice. Democrats are not offering anything except resist and obstruct, and we are offering results that have made people's lives better: higher wages, 4 million new jobs, record low unemployment. So many good things are happening for this country. So it is a very clear choice. Now, Democrats want to make it all about division and scare tactics. We're here saying, vote for our policies because we're going to make your lives better.
Yeah, one of the things that keeps showing up in many of the states across the country and things that people are most concerned about is health care.
Yes.
And yet Democrats say that Republicans aren't doing anything on that front.
Well, you've heard the president at rally after rally. He says, first of all, we are going to protect pre-existing conditions, and that Medicare for all that Democrats are promising that they don't know how to pay for actually could hurt seniors in the long run. Because if you do Medicare for all and you put everybody in the system, the people who've been paying into it are going to get less quality health care. So Democrats are good at promising the moon. They're not talking about how they're going to pay for it. We're for delivering results, and don't believe their scare tactics. Of course, we're going to protect pre-existing conditions. They're trying to run that across the country, and we're countering it very well.
All right, we'll see 28 days from now
28
how the
days.
messages resonate. Ronna McDaniel, thanks for stopping in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, capping off a whirlwind day. President Trump rallying support for GOP candidates in Iowa just a short while ago. Part of his pitch, touting a promise kept to Iowans regarding a very popular thing out there, ethanol. White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live in Council Bluffs, the scene of tonight's rally, to tell us more. Hi, Kevin.
Always great to be with you, Shannon. You probably know this. Iowa is actually the nation's largest producer of both corn and ethanol, so it might stand to reason with the president announcing the fact that E15 could soon be available across the country nationwide. Well, that was certainly music to the ears of a great many folks in attendance tonight at another Make America Great rally. A lot of Iowans, a lot of Nebraskans there, all there to hear the president extol the virtues of additional fuel choices for Americans. About 7,000 people here, and they heard this pitch that E15 could ultimately be a real boon to the Hawkeye and Husker economies.
You've got a lot of farmers in both, right? And my administration is protecting ethanol, all right? That's what you want to hear. Today, we are unleashing the power of E15 to fuel our country all year long, not 8 months.
So the EPA begins a review to allow for year-round use of E15. It could take effect next summer. The idea, say administration officials, is to increase biofuel production in this country. They think that will be good for the economy. Now, for those of you out there who are curious, E15 has already been approved for the use in cars made in 2001 and after. But some in the president's base around the country are none too happy about the move because they're convinced E15 could mean the loss of manufacturing jobs and maybe even worse. In fact, a bipartisan group of 20 U.S. senators urged the president last week to reject the sale of year-round E15, arguing it'll drive up the cost of fuel, increase summer pollution, and possibly damage millions of cars. I think it's also important to point this out. A lot of people here really love E15, the idea behind it, but there are also a lot of lawmakers here who are up for election in about a month. Well, they were here as well at the rally. If they can attach this idea of better economy in Iowa, better economy in Nebraska with the president's stamp of approval, they think that'll help them in about 4 weeks. Shannon?
All right, Kevin. Thank you very much. Live with the president. All right. We just heard RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel play up the GOP enthusiasm heading into the midterms. So now let's dig into that a little bit more. The Washington Post says about new polling tonight, this is not what a pro-Kavanaugh electoral backlash looks at, predicting that the most enthusiastic voters are actually not the ones who are into defending the new justice. So joining me now, Fox News politics editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Steiwald, and we're going to talk about one of these really interesting states. Can we talk about Nevada?
We can talk about anything you want.
Because because this one is a really tight race. It's a state that Hillary Clinton won, but there's some polling that's positive for the GOP there, but by a whisker.
By a whisker, and so this is the toughest incumbent race for a Republican this cycle. This is Dean Heller in Nevada. There's new polling out from the New York Times, Marist College, that basically says Heller's in the lead, but he's under 50. And when you're less than a month away from Election Day and you're an incumbent and you're under 50, that's not a good feeling. He's got the edge, but Jackie Rosen, the Democratic Congresswoman who's running against him, is in a prime position. So they can both be happy about where they are. What we don't know yet, and what you were just talking with the chairwoman about, is where does this energy go? How does this play out? Do we see what the Washington Post was talking about there, that's shown very clearly in a CNN poll that's out today, is that if there is a Republican backlash, there is a backlash to the backlash. Right. That the Democrats are surging back into the space, and that they're still enjoying the significant advantage in the generic ballot, and that their intensity remains high and ahead of Republicans.
Okay, now, we have seen the intensity gap close, but let's talk about specifically here in Nevada. Heller does better with men and with whites. Jackie Rosen does better with women and Latinos. So which of these groups do you think will be more critical?
Well, here's the thing. When we talk about the gender gap, it cuts both ways, right? The traditional, when people talk about the gender gap, they're talking about, well, Republicans do poorly with women. You could also flip it and say Democrats do poorly with men. And Rosen is doing about as poorly with men as Heller is doing with women. And we have a real battle of the sexes race shaping up out there. The Kavanaugh nomination, the Me Too movement, and all of that fitting perfectly into this. And the struggle basically comes down to this. Rosen's district and the key swing part of the state is the suburbs south of Las Vegas. That is the real battleground out there, whereas Heller has to count on the rest of the state, which is traditionally and predominantly Republican, to come in for him. And it's going to be a heck of a tussle, and it's one of the races that has sort of flown under the radar. But here's what we can say. Dean Heller has done a pretty remarkable job. He looked like dead meat for a while. He has done a pretty remarkable job in staying in this fight and being in a competitive position so close to the end.
I want to quickly mention, obviously huge news today that Ambassador Haley is stepping down. You had some other names to watch of people that would potentially are on their way out soon.
Well,
I mean, the rumors around here in D.C., and some are not hard to predict.
Well, and the other thing is this. It's normal after a midterm. It's very normal after a midterm to have people leave. That's a reasonable period of service. So basically the rule is you can get out at the anniversary of the inauguration and you can say, I served a year, I did my part. That's sort of the Tillerson-y. He was a little after that. But after 1 year, okay. But if you stay past essentially the 1st of February, you got to stay until after the midterms are over. Now, we are going to see surprises and all kind of stuff go on. James Mattis is always the big question. We don't know what's going to happen there. But that's the big one to consider, and that's the big one to watch.
And I think we all know, including Jeff Sessions, that maybe he's a short timer.
Well,
he says he serves at the pleasure of the president. He's ready to stay or to go.
But he's done huge service for the president. Don't forget that.
He has accomplished many things the president has asked him to work on. All right, Chris Tyrwell, good to see you, and your bow tie.
Yes, ma'am.
Love it. All right, Hurricane Michael barreling towards the Florida Panhandle as a powerful Category 3 storm. We're going to take you live to the scene right after the break. And later, new developments in the case of that missing Saudi journalist, how the U.S. is now getting involved. Stick with us. Florida's governor issuing evacuation orders for dozens of counties ahead of Hurricane Michael's landfall. I'm going to take you now live to the scene with correspondent Phil Keating. He is there along the Gulf Coast. Hey, Phil.
Hi, Shannon. Let's start with the latest update advisory from the National Hurricane Center at 11 p.m. Eastern. It is growing in strength. Now Hurricane Michael is up to 125 mile an hour sustained winds, 5 more miles an hour, and it's a Category 4. And the experts do expect that to happen overnight and make landfall as a Category 4 storm. Plywood is up on a lot of the buildings and houses all along the Florida Panhandle. This is downtown Apalachicola. But interestingly enough, many businesses on the other side of the street, out of perhaps less concern than they would have had, or they left town already before things escalated to a Category 4, still lit up. So you can see there's still power. Winds have definitely been picking up over the last few hours. Still haven't got those first heavy bands of rain, and 12 inches of rain can be expected. There is some concern among emergency operations leaders that enough people who should have evacuated did not. The Bay County Sheriff, that's Panama City, says that traffic outbound should have been a lot heavier than it was. If 75% of his county is in an evacuation zone, one officer here thought 65% left, but it's a lot of people who did stay. However, there were tens of thousands of people who did evacuate, and that meant over the past few days, long lines of cars and trucks at gas stations, a lot of pumps frequently running out of gasoline as they waited for new tanker trucks to bring in more fuel. There was certainly a heavier outbound traffic heading north, east, and west from the coastline last night at 7 o'clock than you would typically see. And Florida State University up in Tallahassee, there's no class all the way until next week. So a lot of parents came in that we saw bringing their students out of there. Empty store shelves, that is the norm at every grocery store and hardware store, all the way from Pensacola way down here to Apalachicola and beyond. And the governor has been touring the state all day long, county by county, and his Emergency Operations Center is very concerned about this storm. Listen.
This storm is deadly. Do not take a chance. Think about the destruction we've seen before with storms like Hurricane Irma. The Panhandle and Big Bend will likely see winds in excess of 110 miles per hour. Stop and think about that. 110 miles per hour winds. Right here in Franklin County, we could see absolute devastation.
And some of the longest lines of cars we saw today were at bank ATMs, up to 20 or 30 cars lined up, because in the days after a hurricane and a lot of power outages are expected, that means no credit cards, cash, it will be king. Shannon.
All right, Phil Keating, be safe down there, you and the crew. Thank you. The investigation into the fate of a missing Washington Post contributor and Saudi journalist intensifies tonight. Saudi Arabia giving Turkish authorities permission to search its consulate in Istanbul. Here's State Department correspondent Rich Edson with how the U.S. is also getting involved.
The disappearance of a Saudi journalist has the attention of the president.
Now, I know what everybody else does, nothing.
President Trump says he'll speak with the Saudi government about Jamal Khashoggi, last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Critics claim the Trump administration's been reluctant to pressure or criticize Saudi Arabia. The State Department says senior U.S. officials have spoken with Saudi counterparts.
Are you assuming that taking time to put out a statement means that the State Department has not been doing anything? Is that your assumption?
What was the State Department doing before?
The State Department was engaged at the highest levels and also at the working level in having conversations with Saudi government officials, and I'll leave it at that.
Khashoggi wrote for the Washington Post and was a critic of the Saudi government. Turkey's foreign ministry says the Saudi government is cooperating, allowing investigators to examine Saudi consular buildings in Istanbul, where Khashoggi was last seen. The Washington Post published a surveillance photo of Khashoggi walking last week into the consulate.
One way or another, he was taken somewhere else. But we want more details. Even if he has been killed, that evidence, those details should be presented. We want to see Jamal.
Investigators are also looking into 15 Saudis who they say arrived in Istanbul just before Khashoggi's disappearance, when he entered the Saudi consulate to pick up paperwork that would allow him to marry his Turkish fiancée. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the Saudi government should prove that Khashoggi left the consulate, as it claims. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States writes, quote, "I assure you that the reports that suggest that Jamal Khashoggi went missing in the consulate in Istanbul or that the kingdom's authorities have detained him or killed him are absolutely false and baseless." The Washington Post has just released a statement saying there is no evidence Jamal Khashoggi ever left the Saudi consulate, and that for the sake of Jamal's family, they call again for answers about his whereabouts, that silence, denials, and delays are not acceptable. We demand to know the truth. Shannon?
All right, Rich, we'll stay on that story. More news next.
A lot of colleges.
Hey, you get any financial advice?
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's the same plan they sold me before.
Well, your situation's totally changed now.
Right.
How about a plan that works for 5 kids, 2 dogs, and Jake over here?
That'd be great.
That would be great.
That okay with you, Jake?
Get a portfolio that works for you now and as your needs change from TD Ameritrade Investment Management.
President Trump introducing Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds tonight at his MAGA rally in Council Bluffs. Just yesterday, Governor Reynolds did something usually associated with the left. The Republican, facing a tough re-election fight, signed into law Indigenous Peoples Day, which henceforth will fall on the same day as Columbus Day. But some on the right are sounding the alarm over what they call constant attacks on historic and public figures. Columbus, Churchill, and Melania, a Wall Street Journal headline reads, the left's endless media assaults on Western civilization and Trump. Here to weigh in, the editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal, James Freeman, and former Treasury Department official Morgan Ortagus. Great to have both of you with us tonight.
Hey, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, so James, let's talk a little bit about the column that you wrote that appeared there. And it talked about a number of public figures that the left hasn't been sensitive about attacking on a number of fronts over the last few days.
Yeah, and Columbus in particular, his day is sort of dropping out of fashion now. People want to talk about the Indigenous Peoples Day and not recognizing Columbus, and I think it's really an injustice. Certainly Columbus had his faults, but I think you have to give him credit for the creation of America, and which I think objectively we should say is the best thing to happen to the world in at least the last 1,000 years.
Well, and you know, a lot of these conversations about Churchill or Columbus or anyone else note that many historic figures who have accomplished good things are flawed human beings that had great misgivings or positions or took actions or didn't take actions that people think they should have taken that did have impact as well. The mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, puts it this way about Columbus Day. He says, Columbus Day is a relic of an outdated and oversimplified version of history. This issue is a lot like the Confederate flag for Southerners. As an Italian American, it feels good that there is an official holiday that is nominally about us. We are proud of our heritage, yet the specifics of this holiday run so deep into human suffering that we need to shift our pride elsewhere. Morgan.
That's a lot.
It is to digest.
for as it relates to Chris. Listen, I think all of these people that we're talking about, whether it's Columbus, Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, everyone is a product of their time and in which they live. And I think we have to judge people based on the accomplishments of their time. Did they stand the test of time? Did they stand the scrutiny for whatever issue they were dealing with in that time? When you look at Churchill, for example, you know, he almost single-handedly, with the help of the Americans and a lot of other people, but through his pure grit, got the Allies on board to stop Germany from wiping out almost an entire race of people, the Jewish people. So when we start looking at all of these historical figures, it's quite easy to nitpick them, but I think what we should be teaching our children, and the lesson that we should all be learning as Americans and as citizens, is what type of humanity, what type of courage did these individuals show, and what can we take from these lessons? I mean, I think that the entirety of Western Europe has to thank Churchill for what he stood up and what he did during the time. And the fact that people are now criticizing him for some viewpoints that he probably had that were not fantastic at the time misses the much larger point in the lesson that we all should be learning from Churchill.
I want to get a quick reaction from both of you, too, about a current day figure, which is the First Lady. The New York Times talking about one of her outfits worn on her African trip, saying, to some, especially those who study African history, her fashion choice in Kenya was still a big error on the global stage. The sight of a First Lady wearing something so closely associated with the exploitation of Africans. James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, they're talking about that white pith helmet she's wearing, which about a decade ago, the New York Times wrote a piece about how it was part of this sort of timeless ensemble that never goes out of style. But now, since Melania Trump is wearing it, it's a awful symbol of European colonial rule and is some great affront to Africans who were her hosts. It didn't quote any of the Kenyans who were there being offended. It instead quoted academics at U.S. universities. So this, again, it's sort of a twofer for the media going after Western civilization and the First Lady.
Morgan, 10 seconds. Finish this out.
Well, I like the outfit. I think she looks amazing. I was in Kenya in February, and I'm sure the Kenyan people, who are some of the most gracious people on the planet, loved having the First Lady there.
All right, Morgan and James, we loved having both of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks.
Okay, more about Antifa taking over some streets in Portland. That story next. Protect the rights of Antifa to protest. That leads tonight's Western Roundup. But Portland citizens complained as the Antifa activists blocked their right-of-way, literally. You could see them there, and the police did nothing. Police officers were monitoring the protests but say they did not intervene in order to protect the rights of the protesters. The Antifa activists were diverting traffic during a demonstration about the shooting death of a black man by Portland police. Meanwhile, the union representing ICE employees there has asked state and federal officials to open a criminal investigation of Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler over his direction of the police response to ICE protests over the summer. You'll remember during the protests, demonstrators blocked areas around the ICE office, set up makeshift camps, and clashed with federal police officers. California's Secretary of State is demanding a new investigation into the DMV, which blames a processing error for improperly registering non-citizens to vote in California. The DMV says none of the people mistakenly registered are in the country illegally. Well, here's one non-citizen who got registered by the DMV.
Got this little postcard thing, this little piece of cardboard, and it said, congratulations, you're registered to vote. I thought, oh, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
Residents in Alameda, California, voicing opposition to a plan to turn an abandoned federal building into a homeless shelter. Many calling it a safety risk, warning its proximity to a park and children's center could put kids in danger. All right, check it out. Tonight's Midnight Heroes are the folks behind the Defenders Lodge. It's an organization that provides lodging for veterans who are waiting for admission or treatment in VA hospitals. Lisa Freeman realized veterans were sleeping in their cars while waiting for treatment because they couldn't afford hotel rooms. So she reached out to the Penn Fed Foundation, a philanthropic group. With the help of former Secretaries of State George Shultz and Condoleezza Rice, they all raised $11 million. Defenders Lodge has now provided veterans undergoing treatment and their families more than 115,000 nights of free hotel stays. Lisa Freeman, Defenders Lodge, and the Penn Fed Foundation, all of you are tonight's Midnight Heroes. Our veterans, too. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.
The local newspaper has uncovered a brand new species of fake news they think you need to know about: imaginary left-wing mobs. In a piece posted last night, the Post explained that in order to win the midterm elections, those Republicans have, quote, cast the Trump resistance movement as an angry mob. Now, cast is, of course, here a synonym for misrepresented. The Washington Post wants you to know that these mobs are not real. They're an illusion. And that may surprise you, because you may have recently seen videos of prominent Republicans being chased out of restaurants by screaming progressives. You may have read news accounts about how a Republican congressman from Louisiana was shot with a high-powered rifle by a Bernie Sanders supporter. You may have seen college campuses descend into rioting simply because conservatives showed up to talk. And just this past weekend, you may have watched transfixed as groups of hysterical young people yelled at Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill and then pounded in rage on the front doors of the Supreme Court. All of this may have given you the mistaken impression that there is a threat of disorder and lawlessness from the left building in this country. Some of it funded by a man that the Washington Post neutrally describes, and we're quoting now, as philanthropist George Soros. Well, rest easy, says the Post. In fact, all of this talk of left-wing mobs, quote, taps grievances about the nation's fast-moving cultural and demographic shifts. In other words, this is racism, and it's designed, says the Post, quote, for the benefit of white voters, particularly men. Wow. So the angry left-wing mobs you thought you had been watching on television turn out to be merely a hallucination. They're a fever dream concocted by those diabolical magicians over at Fox News. Thank heaven. You can wake up now. None of it is real. It's 1996 again. But wait, has anyone told the angry left-wing mobs about this? They seem to believe that they exist. In Portland, they're still blocking traffic and breaking things and screaming at old ladies in wheelchairs. Apparently, they don't get the Washington Post in Oregon. Watch.